Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Great. Good. Welcome to Dawn or Doom. Before we get started, my name is Alex Kingman. I work for ITAP, and I'd like to do a little administrative stuff for you. We have some door prizes that are available on this side of the building, and I believe we're going to do this every session, so I'll read off the first names, and remember just to pick up your prizes on this side of the building. Look for the Dawn or Doom booth. We have Tammy Guerrero, Caroline McKinney, Hongyu Zhang, Nicholas Hoen, Santosh Kanal, Byron Reed, Victor Raskin, Natasha Phillips, Lisa Phillips, and Crystal Domkowski. Again, pick up your door prizes at the booth on this side of the building. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to begin by introducing Jerry McCartney, Purdue University CIO.
Well, the people who won the door prizes are already having a good time now, I guess. So for everybody else, we're going to kick off this program now. We're going to open with a kind of a conversation here between James Barrett, the author of the book that started this whole thing rolling, and Dean Gary Bertolini, Dean of our College of Technology. So I ask you to attend and enjoy this session. Check out the rest of the day as well. There's plenty of sessions going on, plenty of choice. I encourage you to kind of dip in and dip out of events as you come across them. And remember, there's also a movie track going on that you can go and enjoy too while you're at it. And we'll finish tonight back in here at 5 o'clock with Mr. Barrett giving his kind of keynote presentation. And he'll be accompanied by Mitch Daniels. And that should be quite an event at the end of the day to finish it all off. So thank you very much for that. I'd like to welcome Mr. James Barrett and Dean Gary Bertolini to the stage.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Dean Gary Bertolini. I'm going to be here basically talking to James in a very relaxed manner. There are two microphones on the side. We'll occasionally ask if there's any questions from the audience, so you might want to think about that as we have our conversation. So James, let me start off by first of all welcoming you to Purdue University.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many students attending. If you have a question at any time, please feel free to get up and use one of the mics. The idea here is just to have a free-flowing conversation. And this is such an important topic, the whole subject of AI risk, that it raises a lot of questions. And those questions are no good unless they're aired, unless you get some solution for them, or at least a direction pointed out. So please feel free to interrupt us and get up and ask questions.
All right. So James, I finished reading your book about 5 minutes ago. And not really, but I found it fascinating, actually. And some of my work is somewhat related to this. So I could actually relate some of what we're doing to what some of the challenges are. And I think the topic is fascinating for a number of reasons. I actually, in a previous life, taught courses around technology, society, and the impact, and the idea that technology can have a profound impact, and it also can be something that's scary if humans don't really be careful about how it's applied. But this actually, I think, takes it to another level. This is something that I think is even beyond my knowledge of what is happening with technology. So to frame this, could you describe, first of all, how you would define artificial intelligence?
Okay, that's a very good observation and question. Artificial intelligence is the science and study of giving machines the abilities that heretofore were a product of human intelligence. And those are things like visual perception, translation, theorem proving, navigation, search, all the things that we ask computers to do that we do. And that's what makes it, this is kind of, I call this, and at my talk tonight, I call this a gateway thought. If you're put off by artificial intelligence, or you're wondering about it, and it seems like the realm of the nerds, and nobody else is allowed in, I invite you to think about it this way. It's the most profound look at ourselves of any of the sciences. It involves psychology and neuroscience and ethics and logical reasoning. It involves thinking about thinking, so it involves a lot of philosophy. It asks us really in a very deep way who we are and what we are and how we move and perceive and do things in the world. In fact, the definition, the theory of teaching machines how to do things that we do throws it right back to humans. And that's really the genesis of it. It really asks us what is intelligence itself.
Very good. So when you look at the book, it obviously takes some time describing what artificial intelligence is, as well as artificial general intelligence, and then the next step, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But why are prominent thinkers like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk really concerned about this superintelligence?
Well, their concern goes back to the first subject you raised, and that's technology and society. One of the things that's been ringing in my ears for years now is that our innovation runs far ahead of our stewardship. Our innovation in technology runs far ahead of our stewardship with technology. And fission, nuclear fission, is a great example of that. And I bring it up a lot because we need to think of artificial intelligence as a dual-use technology. A dual-use technology is capable of great good and great harm. And like nuclear fission. In the 1920s and 30s, nuclear fission was thought of as a way to split the atom and get free energy. And this era of utopia would follow. The way the public was introduced to fission was at Hiroshima, because it had been very rapidly weaponized. So what followed then was half a century with a gun pointed at our own heads with fission, with the nuclear arms race. So that was, as a technology maintenance plan, that was a giant failure that almost led to our annihilation. Right now, we're in the promising part of AI. We're in the great applications. We're seeing all the bright sides of AI. The weaponization is already occurring with the development of battlefield robots and autonomous drones. And these are drones and robots that work without humans in the loop. This is a debate that's going on kind of behind closed doors, but the technology is being developed right now. So it has a lot to do. It has a lot in common with nuclear fission.
Sure. Well, let me follow up with, when I was teaching this class on technology and society, we used to get into debates about, is technology out of control? And we all normally came up with the conclusion that, technology is really just an outcome of humans, and if anyone's out of control, it's humans. I think what's really different about this is that we're talking about a technology that actually can become out of control. Is that an accurate assessment of the way I'm reading that?
Yes, and that's jumping ahead a bit in the evolution of AI.
Sure.
But as you mentioned Stephen Hawking, and Stephen Hawking recently, the physicist Stephen Hawking, Max Tegmark, another physicist, he's from MIT, and Stuart Russell, who co-wrote the textbook on AI, artificial intelligence, a modern approach, all got together and wrote an essay that basically said, beware of superintelligence. And the one thing they really drew out of it, that I drew out of it, was they said in the short term, we need to worry about who controls the AI. In the long term, we need to worry about, can we control AI at all? So right now there's a giant race, a multi-billion-dollar race to create artificial intelligence that's general, that's human-level artificial intelligence. That seems to be, depending on who you poll, I go into some of the data tonight, some of the polling, but that's not all that far away, according to the mean dates we get. That's a stepping stone for superintelligence, and superintelligence is intelligence that we can create that's 1,000 or even 1,000,000 times smarter than we are, more intelligent than we are. And that's when we have to wonder, how will it behave? And that seems to be a losing proposition. How do you figure out how something will behave if it's thousands of times more intelligent than you are? Well, as I talk about in our final invention, and I'll speak about tonight, there are good arguments for believing that superintelligence won't be benign. It won't be without drives. It won't be garbage in, garbage out, as computer systems are now. And it may not be controllable.
Very good. So can you give us some examples of countries or companies that are actually heavily engaged in this type of research and development?
It is. So why would a company want to make a computer as smart as a human? Why would that be a good thing? Any thoughts?
You have a computer that's smarter than 1,000 humans. That's 1,000 less humans you need to employ.
Very good. Very good. And that's the way things are going. You know, MIT just released a study that said within the next 20 years, I think it's 47% of our jobs could be replaced by automation or robotics or artificial intelligence. So that's exactly a right answer. Any others? Why else would you want to have?
They might be better at doing things like calculating creditworthiness, investment risks.
Yeah. And they do that now. A lot of that, you know, a lot of those systems are automated now. You just plug in.
Much more efficient. So
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah. Anybody else? It's to me, in my mind, it will be the most. If you had imagine virtual brains at the price of a computer, you'll have essentially, virtual brains at the price of a computer. Ray Kurzweil is expecting that by 2029, and that's one of the dates. It's one of the cluster of dates around when AGI or human-level intelligence could be invented. And one of the things you could do with it is you could take 20,000 PhD quality brains, put them together, and really attack cancer. Do cancer research, do climate modeling. And a big one, weapons development. One of the things Stephen Hawking brought out in his paper was that, imagine how clever this superintelligence will be. Imagine the weapons it devises. How can we understand a weapon devised by something 1,000 times more intelligent than we are? So these are some of the issues that superintelligence raises.
So you talk about Google a lot in your book, for example, the search engine, and that's leading towards artificial intelligence. Is that a good example of a company that's working in that area?
That's a great. Oh, sorry, I meant to give you some examples. Sure. Okay, well, let me just spit off some examples. Google, Vicarious, DeepMind, IBM. There's a bunch of others. A company called Grok. I've got a bunch in my talk tonight. There's countries. There's China. There's the United States. There's organizations within our country. You know, there's the Department of Defense with its many branches. There's DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which has made it very clear that they want to create human-level intelligence in a machine. There's the NSA, which has a $50 billion black budget and a long, long history of being reckless with technology. As a little aside, the tool that they used to collect your address book and mine was AI. It's deep mining, data mining software. So already we have examples of AI being abused by government organizations. A $50 billion black budget is a formidable budget, every year to throw at something like creating human-level intelligence in a machine. Then there's Israel and China. Both have made it very clear that they want to create human-level intelligence in a machine.
Right. So there's a lot of work going on right now.
There's a lot of work going on, and yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things I noticed you said that, like IBM, in your book you bring out, they've been pretty upfront about it. They, through Blue Horizon and the Jeopardy challenge, they've been very open about their development, but a company like Google is more keeping it inside the company.
Sure,
could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, there's in my mind, there are a lot of companies, big and small, that are trying to create AGI, and they're doing it as rapid product development. They're trying to create products they can put on the market. Ray Kurzweil is now working for Google. So there's some companies that are very public and some companies that are very private. Some companies are so private, they're called stealth companies. Has everybody heard of stealth companies? There are a lot of stealth companies in artificial intelligence development, and they want to stay stealth. They want to stay under the radar because they've collected all the capital they need for the next 10 or 15 years. Vicarious is an example of that, and they don't want anyone to have an insight into their particular route to AGI or human-level intelligence, and they want to keep other people from stealing their property, which is legitimate on the one hand. On the other hand, it's as if everyone's setting up a private nuclear power plant in their backyard, and they don't want any oversight. And that's the way I think about it. It's like developing fission in your backyard without government oversight. So IBM has been very good about issuing itself grand challenges, as you said, like chess, and now Jeopardy.
Yes.
And I think they'll, if I were David Ferrucci, who is the head of Team Jeopardy, I'd say that we'll try and pass the Turing test by 2025. But they're very open about their architecture, about their techniques. IBM's Watson is a fabulous cognitive architecture. But Google, on the other hand, they play their cards very close to their chest. They've been a little scary about that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So in the book you talk about that there's multiple paths for us to get to artificial general intelligence. There's the programming approach, there's the replication of the human brain, basically. Could you talk a little bit about that, the
Sure.
pathways?
Sure. In a very overview sense, there's most paths to AGI are a combination of what I'm going to describe. One is the bottom up, and one is the top down. The bottom up takes the brain as the model. It looks under the hood of the brain. It looks at what neurons do, what clusters of neurons do. It sees the clusters of neurons act like circuits, and they're really just a bunch of instructions. It creates those instructions in algorithms, in computer programs. And then it tries to mimic very precisely what that cluster of neurons do in the human brain. And that's been very promising with, it's worked really well with optical character with visual recognition, and it's working well right now with hearing and language processing. That's the bottom up. So you look under the hood, you see the brain, you try to copy the brain. That's often called reverse engineering the brain. Then there's the top down, and that's holding the brain at a distance, holding people at a distance, and using principles of psychology to try to figure out what it is we do. And so that's where psychology comes into play. So you're watching what the output is of human intelligence, like really good navigation. Then you try to figure out how that's being done, but not by looking that closely at the brain. Most programs right now are doing both. Ray Kurzweil is trying to do a combination. He's working for Google now, and he's using principles of the brain to bring strong AI and deep learning to search. Also, one of my favorite statistics, he's going to try to create a machine that makes 100 trillion calculations per second, and he wants to share that with 1 billion people. So I'm pretty sure I have that statistic right. You'll have to come to the lecture tonight and see if I got that right. 100 trillion calculations per second, sort of modeling what he calculates the speed of the human brain to be able to do that many calculations per second, and then have the bandwidth to share that with 1 billion users online. So it's a tool I'm looking forward to using. But that's, imagine a human brain online that you can access and get it to do, use it for research, use it to answer questions. It'll be a great toy.
Yeah. So out of those two paths that you just described, can you talk a little bit more about what are the pros and cons of each approach?
Well, I spoke to Richard Granger at the Brain Engineering Lab at Dartmouth, and he throws away. He's a very bottom-up guy. He throws away the top-down as being as it'll never achieve it.
Yeah.
And he says, why not look at the engineering specs of what you're trying to create? Why not look at the brain itself? And he finds the other approach just very naive. And a lot of people who are top-down or were top-down, Ben Goertzel is a name that might ring a bell to some people. Ben Goertzel, with his OpenCog system, is really trying to do a purely programmed or top-down approach. And Richard Granger just shakes his head and he says, you'll never get anything like the brain. But that raises a question that's very important for ethical reasons, is that if you're doing very rapid product development and you're not modeling your system on a precise mirror of the human brain, then you're not going to have any of the any of the emotional sense, the intuition, and maybe none of the ethical sense that humans have. We have a huge mammalian inheritance of empathy and kindness, and also violence. But machines will have none of that, pro or con. So there's a, yeah.
Yeah, interesting problem.
It's a really interesting problem.
Yeah, and that goes to the core of what you're talking about, is that, how do you program in feelings? How do you program in a the consciousness that humans have, and not knowing what the outcome is of a purely mechanical kind of system? I think it goes to the core of actually what interested you in this topic to write the book to start with, right?
Yeah. Well, I interviewed some people for a film about, I often make documentary films. I mean, that's really my main job. In fact, let me put a pitch in for one I've got on PBS on October 1st. It's called Rise of the Black Pharaohs. It's got nothing to do with AI. It's about the Kush dynasty, which in 700 BC rose up from what's now Sudan and overthrew the Egyptian empire and became pharaohs for 100 years. And this was a black African dynasty that overthrew Egypt. And there used to be this pernicious and durable lie in archaeology until about 30 years ago that black Africans never created monumental architecture. There are more pyramids in Sudan than there are in Egypt. And so what used to happen with archaeologists is everything they found in Sudan they attributed to Egyptians. But it's absolutely not the case, and I hope you'll tune in on October 1st on PBS. Check your local listings.
Great plug. So getting back to the interest, I think you were in the process of actually making a documentary on AI, and you found out there was much more to it. Is that correct?
Yeah. I was, like a lot of people, I'd read Ray Kurzweil's book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, and that to me was a breakthrough for me. That was my gateway book. I'd been interested in programming, and I'd done a little programming, and I'd been interested in AI for a long time. I read that book and saw this real promise of AI, all the good things that could come out of it. And so I was lucky enough to get assigned to make a film about artificial intelligence. It was actually about the movie and the book 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so I got to interview, the first thing that went through my mind is I'll get to interview Ray Kurzweil. And he was very generous with his time. He was talking about, this is 12 years ago, before he was involved with Google. He really is the Thomas Edison of our time. He's done a lot of fundamental work on optical character recognition, voice recognition, and now he's working at Google, of course. But he said, it was all about the promise of AI and all the good things it could deliver. And then I interviewed Rodney Brooks, which is a name you probably know. He's now, this was 15 years ago, he was doing some interesting work with iRobot, and I think he just founded iRobot. Ironically, I took 2 iRobots to Sudan to help us look in pyramids. It's a small world. So I interviewed him, but then he was also very optimistic about the time coming when we'll share the planet with smarter than human machines. And then I interviewed Arthur C. Clarke, which was one of the highlights of my career as a filmmaker. Clarke was a mathematician and a physicist before he was a science fiction writer, so he came from a hard science background. He wrote a really influential book of equations about how to get a payload out of Earth's orbit. And when Werner von Braun got out of Germany, the first person he wanted to meet was Arthur C. Clarke.
Wow.
So he said, I told him my inherited euphoric utopian ideas about AI, and he just shook his head and he said, no, intelligence will win out. Will be controlled by intelligent machines. And this is the guy who created the HAL 9000, the robot from 2001. So that planted a seed of doubt in my mind, and I started reading. I started talking to people who were also interested in AI risk.
All right. So the next question I'd like to talk about is how far away are we actually from artificial general intelligence? The book, I don't remember all the details, but I know you did an informal survey of some people working in this area, and you asked them whether they thought it was 2030, 2050, 2070, and never, whatever. Can you share a little bit about what you're hearing out there?
Sure. better pollsters than I have done polls, and combined with my informal poll at a couple of AI conferences, talking with AI makers, and this is my polling of AI makers. The mean date for creating human-level intelligence in a machine is 2045. One of the closer dates is 2029. There's quite a big cluster of voters there. Some people think by 2020. I'm kind of on the outside of that. But from what I've seen with Ray Kurzweil and Google right now, I'm not so sure it won't be sometime in the 2020s. The outside date is 2100. A very small percentage said never. But let me ask you guys a question, just briefly, and I'm going to ask this tonight. I don't want to give away everything of the lecture, otherwise you won't come back. But who believes that we can create, engineers and scientists can create human-level intelligence in a machine? So that's quite a few people. Okay, so those of you who don't believe that, then either there's something that's just too difficult about the problem in an engineering sense, or there's something mystical or magical about the human brain. Who thinks it's too hard in an engineering sense to create human-level intelligence in a machine? And who thinks there's something immutable or mystical about the human brain that can never be achieved? And that's you're reflecting pretty closely what the AI experts said. Most of them predictably believe that it can be done, or they'd be out of jobs. Although not all of them were working on creating human-level intelligence. A very small percentage think it can't be done, that the problem is simply too hard, and that no matter of clever programming or good hardware will ever get us to emulate a human brain. And then a very tiny percentage think there's something magical about consciousness, and that consciousness is critical to intelligence.
Very good. So you talk in the book about the intelligence explosion. Could you describe what that is and what it means?
Sure. Has anybody heard of the idea, the intelligence explosion? Got a few people?
Singularity.
Well, the singularity is, I don't like that word, and I'll tell you why.
That's why I haven't asked you about that word.
I get hives when I think of that word. The singularity is another term for what happens when we share the planet with smarter than human machines. But the history of the singularity idea, I'll just go into it very briefly, is that Werner Vinge, in the 1990s, he's a mathematician and science fiction writer. In the 1990s, said that he couldn't write about the distant future beyond about 20 years, because then he thought we'd share the planet with smarter than human machines, and all of human history would be so radically changed that he couldn't posit what would happen next and what the world would be like. So he called that the singularity, which is the point on the edge of a black hole. It's a technical term. I don't know how technical, but it's the point at the edge, on the event horizon of a black hole where not even light can escape. And he was using it as a metaphor, that you can't see beyond it because light can't escape. Therefore, it's unknowable. And there was a kind of a crisis in the science fiction community because they couldn't write about it. So that was the real meaning of the word singularity. It was this unknowable thing. Then Kurzweil came along and rebranded it. And it was for him, in the age of spiritual machines and in the singularity is near, it's the time when a confluence of technologies, nano, info, bio, and cogno, all those technologies will come together, especially AI, cogno, and I guess that's also info, will come together and change our existence and rid the planet of disease and famine, and ultimately provide immortality to all of us. So that's the new definition of the singularity. So that's why I don't like the singularity, because I think that's a big fairy tale, and I find it. I really like. I think Ray Kurzweil is a great scientist, and I've interviewed him twice. And I think that this is a dangerous and misleading myth. So this question started somewhere else.
Yeah, with the intelligence explosion,
Okay.
what that really is.
Why don't you tell me what you think, what your version is?
Well, I think that, as humans evolve and develop and we integrate the technologies, that it's where the intelligence feeds off of itself and it becomes exponential instead of linear. And I guess that's the best way I would explain it.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Well, that's it.
I learned a lot from your book.
Well, the intelligence explosion came out, it's an idea that came out in the 60s, put out by a mathematician named I.J. Good, who kind of wrote it as an aside and put it aside. It was later picked up by Werner Vinge. And he was looking at it when he came up with his singularity concept, a negative singularity. But what I.J. Good said basically is that soon we'll create machines as smart as humans, and thereafter, shortly after, we'll create machines smarter than humans. They'll be able to do everything that we do intellectually, but better, faster, stronger, stay up all night, don't need pizza, do it 24/7. And then the intelligence of those machines will necessarily surpass ours. So human level intelligence is the first milestone, and that's a stepping stone for superintelligence and the kind of intelligence we no longer can understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's sort of it.
Sure.
That's it.
We do encourage questions, so if anyone would like to ask a question, please go up to the microphones. I'm going to ask another one if you want to do that. So when you look at AGI and look at its development, we already talked a little bit about what that means and that we're approaching it, but the part that we haven't talked about is how close are we actually to AGI, where it is really self-aware, a self-improving cognitive architecture? Are we actually approaching that?
Well, my estimation of when that'll happen keeps getting closer and closer. Looking at IBM's Watson and what it does, I know a lot of computer scientists are impressed, a lot aren't that impressed. But if you look at the aggregate of technologies, I think it's really the first of a new species, a cognitive architecture, a real thinking machine. If you look closely at what it does, how it generates hypotheses, how it analyzes the hypotheses, how it scores them, and then reevaluates them, and then votes, then decides which one to put forth. It's pretty amazing, I think. Right now, IBM's Watson is studying to take the federal medical licensing exam. So next time someone says AI is not going anywhere, well, you tell it, well, it's going to your doctor's office. It's doing discovery. It's doing what first-year law associates do, legal discovery. So it's doing diagnostics. It's doing pharmacological research. So it's taking jobs right now, and it will be taking jobs. So either it's not, if AI is not good enough, then neither are we, because it's taking our jobs. Do we have a question?
Do you have a question?
Yeah. So you spoke earlier about the morality of artificial intelligence and it having its own ability to have emotions and such. What are your thoughts on the morality and the ethics that we owe to artificial intelligent agents, if any?
That's a really, really great question, and it's one that, once we survive the intelligence explosion, I'll get around to it. I used to think, we didn't get much into how hard it is to program ethics into a machine. So maybe there is a reason for you to come to the lecture tonight. It's really hard. Take my word for it. Because it's hard. We can't agree on a lot of ethics. We can't agree on a definition of life. We can't agree on when life begins. If you go across to the other side of the world, they don't agree with us on when life begins or what constitutes life. In a lot of the world, women and children aren't included in the notion of personhood, so they wouldn't be included in life. If we survive the intelligence explosion, then we'll have creatures that may have expectations and may suffer and may have a consciousness. And then it's a whole new ballgame, because we'll be compelled to treat them as with quasi-human status. You probably know the arguments from Princeton's Peter Singer about giving quasi-human status to great apes. And it's because it's acknowledging that they're 99% identical to us in their DNA, and their intelligence is way behind. But they have expectations. They do have emotions. They do suffer. So we'll have to consider the morality of enslaving these sentient creatures. But I'd like to survive them first.
Sorry. I was just struck by a notion, and I haven't really thought it out completely, so forgive me if this is a little simple, but it seems like our notion of human intelligence or intelligence evolved with our need to survive, hunting, agriculture, etc. An AI may not have any particular needs beyond, an infrastructure that we built for it. So is it possible we'd invent a sort of super intelligent slacker?
A super intelligent slacker? Well, you know, it could be that superintelligence comes out of video games. I mean, they're doing some of the game-playing AI is fabulous, and it's getting better all the time. Wouldn't it be funny if you created a very, very powerful superintelligence in a hive of supercomputers, and it didn't want to do anything? It was like, you know, clean up your room. I'm playing this game against Mars. Anything is possible. I think one of the definitions that might be helpful here, the definition I got from AI makers about intelligence was the ability to solve, the ability to achieve goals in a variety of novel environments and to learn. So for superintelligence, all the way down the line of development, it's going to have to be goal-oriented. It's going to have to be doing something, whether it's theorem proving or navigating or playing video games. It's going to have to be really good at it. And I'm not sure Slacker's going to make the cut, sorry.
All right. Those are great questions. Thank you. If there's more, please come up. We do have a few more minutes before we're done with this session. I want to read. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So IBM's Watson project is focused on medical knowledge and building a AI that can solve medical problems. Google's working on an AI for self-driving cars, right? But Watson can't drive cars, and Google's car AI can't tell you what medicines you need to take. So what I'm wondering is, how do we go from these AI that are being developed for very economic purposes, very specialized purposes, to this more general AI that has consciousness and has feelings and has all these, you know, myriad of thoughts that you're talking about?
That's a great question. I think that what, you know, here's how it'll probably happen. There's a really good question in AI, and it's, can a submarine swim? Is anyone familiar with that question? You sound like you are a little bit. We're sort of asking, can Watson think? And how do we get to AI that can think? AI theorists talk about, can a submarine swim? Well, a submarine can't swim like a fish, but it can swim farther than a fish, it can swim deeper than a fish, and it can swim longer than a fish. It can't reproduce, you can't fillet it, but it does everything about swimming that a fish does. Can an airplane fly? Well, the Wright brothers learned principles of flight from birds, but they didn't really incorporate many of them into airplanes. But airplanes fly faster and farther than birds. So does IBM's Watson think? And in the same way that the submarine and the airplane were developed, we'll take principles of thought, and this is kind of a combination of the top-down and bottom-up approach, principles of thought and real neuroscience, put them together and create generally intelligent machines that won't be like us. They'll be as powerful as airplanes and submarines compared to our intellect, but they'll be based on our intelligence. That's the product development route. What's happening now, the money is in product development, not basic science. You know, the European Union just gave €1 billion to the Blue Brain Project in Switzerland. That's a basic science of understanding the brain project. They're doing very methodical reverse engineering of the brain. That'll take years and years and years. Meanwhile, something like IBM's Watson will be the foundation for a more general cognitive architecture that does all those things. Why not put Watson together with a car? You know, that's sort of the idea. Put Watson together with a car, give it a robotic body, give it a bunch of other perception abilities, and you'll have something smart and fast, but it won't be human. And that's a big issue. And it won't be ethical unless we program ethics into it. And right now we have a window, and then it will be gone forever, to program ethics into intelligent machines.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have another question?
Considering the imperfection of the human brain, how do you see the bottom-up and top-down debate influenced by the issues of mental illness?
Yeah, good question. A good friend of mine wrote a book called, James Fallon is a neuroscientist who wrote a book called The Psychopath Inside. And he's the guy that pioneered doing fMRI scans of human brains and seeing that psychopaths had very similar brains. A certain percentage of us are psychopaths, and we're psychopaths that function. We're functional psychopaths. Not surprisingly, a lot of politicians. Not surprisingly, a lot of business leaders. So if you're going to mirror the human brain or do a fine-grained, high-resolution scans of human brains, you better be careful about which human brain you pick out to do. You better get a Mother Teresa instead of a Charlie Manson. We hope that those people will have insight. There is a lot of hope with AI research in not mental health issues, but traumatic injury to brains. Because if they can figure out what clusters of neurons do, then they can replace clusters of neurons in damaged brains. So there's a lot of promise in that. But I'm not sure there's going to be a ton of insight into mental illness, except to avoid it in machines.
How do we do that?
I don't know. I don't know. See, that's the thing. We're developing these machines. There's a lot of, we were talking just before we started, Gary and I, about genetic algorithms and genetic programming, and that takes the power of natural selection and solves problems. Well, genetic programming is one of the methods that will be used in creating advanced cognitive architectures. So are artificial neural nets. You've heard of artificial neural networks. That's the key to deep learning. Both of those things are black box systems where you can adjust the inputs and you see the outputs, and if you don't like what you get, you adjust the inputs, but you don't know what's going on in between. And that's a very complex architecture. Those things will be, the way things are going, those will be part of the cognitive architectures we're creating. And so we won't know in a high resolution sense what this brain is doing or how it's doing it. And that's very dangerous. That's a very dangerous feature of this very complex technology.
Thank you. Next.
So science fiction throughout has discussed AI and tackled AI quite a bit, to the point to where the trope is even overused, some would argue. Which doomsday scenario do you think is the most plausible in regards to AI?
There's a great maxim that somebody taught me early on when I was thinking about this, and it said, don't generalize from fictional evidence. Don't plan your day based on a novel you just read, because it might not go that way. The thing about Hollywood, there's two beefs I've got with Hollywood depictions of AI. One, the humans always win in the end. No matter how grueling and awesome the AI is, humans find a way to destroy it. Some tightly knit band of jugheads gets together and defeats this thing that's millions of times more intelligent than they are. It's probably not going to happen that way. And two, Hollywood has inoculated us from thinking seriously about AI. We've had too much fun going to movies, and I go to them all, too much fun watching AI get kicked around and humans winning in the end. So we've been inoculated to this risk. I mean, I don't know how many times I start, and it's not like I start talking and somebody starts saying Terminator. Oh, I saw that movie. I don't need to attend this lecture. I saw that. We win in the end, right? Well, we've been inoculated. We've had too much fun with these Hollywood tropes. And I'm afraid that's a big thing for people interested and involved in AI risk to get over, is to stop no, it's not Terminator, but in fact, that's one of the scenarios that may be actually kind of probable.
So I get to ask the last question. And speaking of Hollywood, it's a great segue. I want to read a quote at the start of chapter 11 by Woody Allen. This is what it says. More than any other time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other to total extinction. Let us pray that we have the wisdom to choose correctly. Is that actually what we're talking about here? Is it really that serious?
I think this is the most important conversation we could be having. I think it's the most dire threat facing mankind, and I include global warming and asteroid strikes. And yes,
Very good.
And I invite you to get involved in the conversation. You've already done it by coming here. Learn more. Don't just read my book. There's a new book by Nick Bostrom called Superintelligence that's just come out. This is like in terms of issues, this is the early days of AI risk discussion. And there's a lot for us all to learn, but it's really only going to be defeated if we have a groundswell of interest and by people. And universities, especially technology schools, great ones like this one, you can make a difference. You have 30,000 alumni from the College of Technology. So yeah, you can make a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, thank you. All right. Well, let's end this with a high note here. I have a gift for you. All right. So, since you've done all the plugging, I need to do a plug. Since we're from College of Technology, we're going to give you a T-shirt that says "I'm a techie." All right.
Excellent.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you so much. It was a great conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Great.
Good job.
I love it.